Greetings to our guests, friends, and subscribers to my channel, to Alexei's channel. This is our traditional stream. We usually have it on Mondays, but today we do it on Tuesday. Good evening, guys. Thank you, everybody, for watching us, for subscribing, for discussing and commenting the events unfolding. Thank you for your reviews, and of course, for those who click like and subscribe. Thank you so very much. If you are watching us from Ukraine or Russia, and have access to YouTube, just change the country you're watching it from. Alexander, you're missing a third option, or you can change the country in reality. Just move to a different place. Right, we will be talking about that. We have two more points, organizational points to make before we go hard on the things unfolding. So the QR codes you have on the left side of the screen under Alexander, this is a place to ask questions for this and the future streams. And the QR code next to Alexei, this is a link to his School of Communication, School of Thought. Right, and School of something else. Something else here, not elsewhere. Anyway, follow these links if you like, and I think that's all the org matters we had. Alexei, I want to start today from the main question of today's stream. I was giving it a thought. There are a lot of events. We have a fresh statement by Trump that it's more difficult to finish war in Ukraine than the war in the Middle East. We have these promised tomahawks. You have continuous horror with the drafting commission and a ton of lies pouring from the Ukrainian TV sets. And military experts in Ukraine don't know how to tolerate that anymore. But since it is today and we're doing it live, I cannot not start with this question. What is the most concerning matter in Alexei's interview to Sobchak? Option 1, give 3 districts in Crimea. Option 2, Ukraine is a big village. 3, putting flowers to the unknown Russian soldier grave. And 4, 13 to 15 pairs of shoes in your wardrobe. So while the audience is voting, Alexei, how would you answer this question? Frankly, I probably would say that I did not use my umbrella well during the interview to cover Ksenia when it was raining. So you think the awkwardest moment in this interview was the rain and the umbrella? Yeah, I think that was the one. And on the other hand, we always had the operators and camera guys moving around since the umbrella was getting in the frame. So it was not convenient. And we jointly decided that it would be better to have a better picture than being a gentleman and covering her from rain. Are you satisfied with the result of this interview? No. Why? Because inviting Arestovich for 3 hours of interview and talk only about how I changed my opinion during the unfolding of this war. Just imagine, Alexander, you would be making cutouts from 2015, from 2006, from 1982 when you were still in kindergarten, you were saying that. And in 1630-something, there was a different event that had effect on everything that is unfolding now. So I was trying to steer that towards the bigger questions of civilizational choice, collective security of Europe. What else can be done? These would be the interesting topics. No, Alexei, this is all BS. Let's go deeper and let me quote you what you said 100 years ago. So if somebody is interested in that genre, then sure, go ahead, knock yourself out, watch that interview, but not me. Alexei, as always, we had a lot of controversy and discussions around this interview. Some people are saying there are several versions of this interview. This one was a specific interview that Arestovich maybe have recorded to sell himself as a candidate for presidency in Ukraine to its neighbor, Russia. But something didn't quite work out, and it changed. The others are saying, no, wait. Today, Arestovich is again being searched for, being sought for by Russia. They today announced that you are needed for criminal accusations in Russia. Apparently, they did not like your interview. The others are saying that this is just a cover operation. International Russian demands are not being answered by any country at the moment, so likely you will not find yourself in a more dangerous place than you were before. By the way, we also still have a fundraiser, an Alexei channel under this stream. There would be a link to that. So some people are saying maybe you are making a good political capital on the difference of potentials. You are great for Ukrainians with your normal interviews and the fundraisers for Ukrainian army, and also you're somewhat acceptable for our Russian neighbors. Listen, Alexander, a lot of commentators are not so delighted by my mental acuity, apparently. But let's, in return, think about the mental acuity of people who think that the best way to sell yourself as a candidate to your neighbor who is at war with your country is via an interview, a public interview. What can you say about that mental acuity? I really don't have anything to offer them except for love and light. I can just hug everybody and feel pity. But that's my reaction to these accusations. This sentence, however, implies that Arestovich is not known in Kremlin. But you are known, Alexei, right? Well, of course, if I was the voice of Ukraine at the beginning of this war for a year and a half, well, you're not the voice of Kremlin. Right, but I was the voice of the country that they're fighting with, so I would expect them to have noticed me. I also was participant of the negotiation group before that, Normandy format, Minsk format. Do you think they might be aware of Arestovich in Kremlin? Because these conspiracy guys are talking about Kremlin is not aware of Arestovich at all, and Sobchak had to take this interview with Arestovich in London to remind Kremlin that he actually exists and he is a possible candidate for presidency in Ukraine whenever the elections come. And then they react by slapping an international warrant on my name. So yeah, this is just another logical construct that can only cause another wave of sharp affection and love to the commentators who are posting that for me. The other thing, what other questions were there? Can you go over them, Alexander? I'll knock them out one after another. Yeah, chronology is interesting. You have played very interestingly on the recording of this interview and when it was aired. No, I was not aware when would she be publishing it. She actually held it for about a month because we recorded early September. And she actually could have put another plaque in a couple places that, oh yeah, hey, he changed his opinion again. And if she waited just one more day, she could have added another asterisk there in the interview that now he is a wanted criminal by Russia, according to Russian authorities. So listen, I experience a feeling of sharp pity to those who got too agitated by this interview. Let's put it this way. But I do treat most of our streams as a seminar that I teach. And here I want to draw attention of our listeners to a couple parallels with Alexander Dumas' Three Musketeers, the Cardinal and the Haberdasher. Look at Trump, who has been talking to Putin for 7 months to strike truce. He brought him over to Anchorage. He made him an offer to save his face, to save some part of the captured territories that Russia acquired this way. New joint projects in Arctic, joint relations with China. So Putin could have been solving a ton of issues of Russia by agreeing to Trump. What does Putin respond? We don't give a damn, right? After this, Trump goes down to tomahawks, and he might go to a couple more resources that they have. And now, regarding the haberdasher, some haberdasher giving an interview to an ex-candidate of a president in Russia, which Sobchak was, by the way, suggests options how to get two peoples to agree to peace and how to leave this war. Joint prayers, joint acknowledgement of mistakes, understanding of heroes and losses in this war, creating the arbitrage system, respect to the fallen, return all for all exchange, neutral status, no NATO, return to the Constitution and Declaration of Independence of Ukraine to the roots. A significant part of a territory which Russia was aspiring to grab as the token for future peaceful relations. What does Russia do? The next day after this interview, they announce this person as a wanted criminal. Do you understand whom we're dealing with here? They're complete imbeciles. The Russian regime now is complete imbecile regime. They only follow their wants, but they do not understand good offers. They do not understand possible ways to solve issues. The only thing they appear to understand now, or want to understand now, is the crash of their skull. And that's apparently, or maybe starting first with a nose bone. But that's the way they are. And I'm for peace, right? But I'm not going to offer 4 districts anymore. I'm not going to bring it up. They need to understand mathematically that continuation of war is a useless thing. And wherever the front line will be, that's where the war will end. They still have a lot of territory to take to actually announce that they got those 4 districts. Our goal now is to make sure that Russia feels the pain and understands that this war is useless, is not profitable. This is the only way for Ukraine to finish this war. And that's why Cardinal Trump gives tomahawks, and the haberdasher Arestovich is running fundraisers for drones. Everything is quite simple. All right, we have generated additional text, I guess, that we could have added to Sobchak's video at the end of her interview. What do you think international warrant mean for Arestovich from Russia? Well, Russian international warrants are not paid attention to in Europe or United States and most countries, so regardless what they want, doesn't mean that anybody will give it to them. Russia is generally being told to go into a short autoerotic journey in most countries of the world with their requests. But it doesn't even matter if Arestovich was giving this interview. Anybody coming out and saying, to any interview, saying, hey, this is how I see we should leave this war. This is how we can end it. These are the ways to finish it, and I think this is reasonable. What should we do with this person? As for me, I would say, listen, people have some good ideas. People who want to finish this war between, as Russia keeps saying, brotherly nations, right? What does Russia do instead? They offer international criminal warrant. This is same thing as if, Alexander, you would invite me to an interview. You're an interesting person to communicate with, and I in return would probably sue you for fraud. Right, or slap me with sanctions, right, Alexei? Exactly. Yeah, how to even deal with that? These people are incongruent. Okay, Alexei, another important point here. We have an approval, an affirmation of a sorts that you were selling, not yourself, but the idea or the vision to that piece. Alexander, I am not selling anything. People have several misjudgments in my regard. Some people think that I am definitely running for a president, and they keep writing in the commentary that we will never vote for you. Missing the point. The other group is saying that you really wanted to be loved by Kremlin with this interview. Well, look at their action. Apparently that was not the case. And the third group was saying that, okay, he's a pro-Russian politician who wanted to be liked by Putin. But again, missing the point. So let's leave these 3 groups with their conspiracy theories on the side and address the matters as they are. I'm not selling anything. And this is exactly what I'm telling Sobchak in the second third of this interview, where she's basically attacking with the same, you want to be liked, you need to compete with Medvedchuk and the others. And I'm reaffirming there that I'm not selling anything. I have all my offers on the table. This is the idea. If you like the idea, we can talk. If you don't like it, there is nothing to talk about. Let me open another mystery here. Russians did offer me tens of millions of dollars. I have not talked about that before, but 2 years ago, I did not take a cent. And I don't have any relations or refused any dealings with them. And I said there won't be any behind-the-door conversations. Everything will be in the open. Which Russians, Alexei? Who specifically? Some kind people, Russians. And what did they offer you money for? Oh, to become what they're trying to paint me now, that I'm a pro-Russian politician who wants to be liked by Kremlin. They were amazed to the depths of their souls, and they said, you're the first person from Ukraine who did not take a cent. All right, this is a sensation that just was poured here in this interview, an important one. What would that money go to? For the election campaign? Oh yeah, for the elections that are not happening? Wait, 2 years ago, tens of millions of dollars for election campaign to the elections that have not occurred, and even today they're not visible on the horizon. Do you think, Alexander, somebody got a golden stamp document that says there will never be elections in Ukraine? You're probably missing the rhetoric of that time. There were a lot of conversations about elections in Ukraine at the moment. And the money were not, such money are not given to run for that specific election right now. It is given as the broader strategic thing. And they were offering $26 million. I did ask them, though, why 26? Why not 20 or 30? They said, well, we made some calculations. That's how much you need to win. All right, 2 years ago, you were in Ukraine, right? No, that was already when I was in political immigration, when I did not return back to Ukraine. Okay, so when you left, right, and when the denouncement between myself and Zelensky's regime became public, yes. That's when some people approached me. Oops. So I have a question here then, and it will be popping up. I'm asking it because you were telling to the Ukrainian interviews and media. We'll talk about Russian interviews separately to the Russian sources, but maybe leave it for the end of this stream today. But my question is, this Ukrainian question coming from Ukraine. What is the proof that you did not take money? I have no proof. But I can tell you that if I was thinking about that logically from the outside, the interview to Sobchak, where I'm stating these things, that my chances to winning in current Ukraine brings it down to zero, this would not be the way for me to earn this money. There would be other indicators. I would not be fundraising for Ukraine military, right? I would not be doing some other things like that. And nobody, of course, it's on your conscience, but there are some things you would or would not be doing. Then one does not have to talk about giving up 4 districts, while the populace is not tired enough from this war to accept such a decision. This would be done differently. This would have to be brought much, much later, when the war would be closing to its sunset, and when the party of war would be losing and the party of peace would be gaining momentum. It would be more welcomed in society. So, Alexei, you were offered to prop up the party of war or the party of peace for this money? Well, definitely not the party of war, right? So that would generally confirm that most parties of peace would be funded by Russians. Well, this is, I don't think this is an appropriate conclusion from this. Well, look, Russians are ready to give money for a peace party, right? Not exactly. They were going to give money to make sure the peace is organized in accordance with, let's say, something like Istanbul agreements. So the party that would bring up demilitarization, denazification, how they see it And the whole laughter of this situation, that's actually what I retorted back. Listen, I'm already on these positions, but I have a certain correction to them. I'm against demilitarization, and for you, this is a key point. Because the threat to Ukraine may be coming not only from you, and those 50,000 of military troops that you're suggesting Ukraine to still have, this would mean the end of independent Ukraine, even if you never attack it again. We are at the intersection of geopolitical plates. And for us, 50,000 is just deferred death till the next big conflict with somebody, not even you probably. So, and second, I cannot be pro-Russian administration. I gave an oath. Which one? Military oath to Ukraine. I'm an officer. That's why if you want to deal with me, we can talk. Everybody talks with everybody. And I would remind our audience that negotiations between Russia and Ukraine never ceased. There were times in 23 when there were 3 different negotiation groups working in parallel. But I will not take your money. I will not get any support for my stance. If you want to talk about peace, sure, we can. And never since I saw these people again. And I told them I do know how you work. This will all be recorded, and I will be put on a very good hook and a leash. And then I will lose any independence. So just from these ideas, I refuse to sit down on this hook. And if you want to talk about peace, sure, we can talk, but without that money. And those people who were representing as emissaries or ambassadors from Kremlin, they disappeared. Which Kremlin are we talking about in this case? The Kremlin that changed with the Cossacks' disappearance? I frankly do not know, Alexander, which of the Kremlin towers did they represent. They were ballpark saying that we have been listening and watching you. You're the only sober voice in the Ukraine media field. Could have been a provocation, for all I know, to maybe compromise or hook one of the potential Ukrainian politicians. But how should I put it delicately here? I did serve in special services, right? And I come from the world of intelligence, so these things are for the fools. All right. Another important aspect here that needs review. When did Sobchak turn to you for an interview? When did you get the request? Maybe a couple weeks before it? End of August? Okay, so in August. I can actually check on my phone. So the time of those 2 weeks by Trump, I think that happened after Anchorage meeting. Let me check to be factual here. Okay, here I see you have a very lengthy communication. No, it was not her. It's one of her managers. End of August. Yeah. My first communication with them was right before the recording on Wednesday, the 10th. But at the end of August, they reached out to my assistants. Why London? I don't know. They asked for London. Okay, I got the confirmation from my assistant. 24th of August, Independence Day. I think Anchorage didn't happen yet. And where were you going with this? No, Anchorage, I think, was on the 15th, right? Okay, so freshly after. Why did you ask? Well, I'm curious about the format of this request. This is a fantastic information, Alexei. 2 years ago, Arestovich, who was not so critical, who was discussing things, and actually I want to thank and warn our viewers, all these things that were voiced in this interview with Sobchak, we talked about all of that in our streams. There was nothing new in this interview. It was just concentrated 3 hours interview with one person. But essentially, same matters. Those viewers of our channel who watch my channels, Alexei's streams, There are no significant discoveries in this interview. But I do want to understand. So in 2023, Arestovich receives phone calls from Yermak people trying to maybe build the bridges back with Alexei. So Arestovich at that time is not really burning bridges with Zelensky's administration. He is still figuring out what is going on. Some pressure is being exerted on his aides and assistants, and he's outside the country and he's trying to figure out his relations with the Ukrainian government. And as he just left, he's being offered 26 million. It's just strange. If you think 26 million is a sensation, it's not even a number. Frankly, if one would be seriously playing this game, you would have been actually offended. 26 is change, just for matches and cigarettes in this world. Maybe for those who watch us on the stream, they're big money, right? For families and, average people, yeah, it is big money. But for political movement, this is nothing. And I do not have confirmation who they are, who they were. They represented themselves as if they are from Russia. Could have been under black flag or under false flag, right? We don't know that. But 26 million is not even a big amount, even in Ukrainian politics. I'm not even talking about Russian politics. And then Sobchak, in 2 years, after Anchorage, she wants an interview with you, Alexei. Well, I did have another interview with Sobchak a year ago, if you remember. We had it, by the way, in English on our channel too. So, she asked me about interview in London. It coincided with my need to be there at a certain date, so I agreed to. All right, Alexei. So, how would these days Arestovich treat an offer from Russian Federation? I would not. If you want to talk, we can talk, but any attempt to aid, any attempt to fund, we stop any communications. All right. Why you think we see now these moves by Russian Federation in regards to something that you'd think they want to bet on somebody, they want to conduct a dialogue with them, but Russia has nobody except for those who left Ukraine for Russia. There are many towers in Kremlin, and I strongly suspect that one or two of them definitely do not like me. And they're the ones inspiring these criminal prosecutions. Plus, their politics is quite nebulous. They also look at the ratings and they can think, okay, in 23rd, he had a rather big potential. Right now, he lost a lot of it. And that's why such an interview with Sobchak and her questions actually surprised me. If you were a president, if you're running for a president, I did answer her that I'm not really concerned much about my chances of being a president. There may be a small chance, a very, very small chance, but... And she insisted on imagining. And okay, I did draw them the golden picture for that case. And next day they announced that they want me for criminal prosecution and send the warrants out. All right, friends, we might get back to this interview. We have a lot of questions today. They're so different aspects. So if we are judging situations from the current date, from today, if we are following the line that Russians need to get their asses handed to them so that they would stop where they are, Alexander, to stop them is only a part of a task. And it's secondary to the main task to make them understand the worthlessness of this war. There are more items there, but I'll indicate a couple. They're saying we are fighting with leftist globalists. If Trump was in power, says Putin, there would be no war. So it's basically leftist globalists to blame in this war, according to Putin. But then look at the decisions made by Xi Jinping and Putin. What communique they adopt after the parade in Moscow. They write about UN-centric world, and they insist on it. They reaffirm United Nations after this meeting on the 3rd of September at the Shanghai meeting. United Nations is the main instrument of the leftist globalists. The number of programs in United Nations where Russia participates is through the roof. Not any other country in the world is funding leftist globalists to such a degree as Russian Federation does. And I would ask a question. If you, in your communications and your publications, if you are fighting with leftist globalists, how many Ukrainian children need to be unalived in this war, and consequently Russian children too, because it's a war, so that you would account that as a victory over leftist globalists? This is ridiculous, right? Trump would be, if they're against globalists, Trump and Modi would be against the leftist globalists. How is Trump fighting the leftists? He's closing USAID, he's closing the Voice of America, he's declaring Antifa a terrorist organization. He's taking systemic steps to fight with the leftist ideology. Right, they're also bringing National Guard to some states. Exactly, because, as in literature, that treason has deep roots. What does Russian Federation do? They continue to attack Ukraine in Zaporozhye, Kherson, Lviv, to continue fighting globalists. Is that? And then Russian Federation is saying that we are for UN-centric world, so lifting the banner of the leftist globalists even higher. These people need to understand, need maybe help to understand all the controversy of their position. I don't think they understand themselves or capable in getting there themselves. This does not diminish all the atrocities and idiotic decisions made by Zelensky regime. And I think we talked about that framework. We forgot about it for a while. But this is the war of two fools. I did talk about that before. And this is the problem. When I was suggesting that option that I voiced with interview, during an interview with Sobchak, this was not only a way to understand my message to review the system of relations since 1991, the roots of the problem, stop this war, repent, and make sure that doesn't happen again. But the tragedy of this situation is that Russian Federation and its leadership made the following decision. It sounds something like this. You all are too flaky. Imagine something unconscious. Arestovich gets unthought of. Arestovich becomes the president of Ukraine, gives the 4 districts in Crimea, makes Ukraine neutral, signs peace agreements with Russia that Ukraine will never attack Russian territory, there will be no threat to it. I'm not even going into all the details, and of course from Russia, no threats to Ukraine, to build some joint umbrella protective system, and that exists for 5 or 10 years. Maybe Arestovich stayed for 2 terms. Right? That is not guaranteed. There will not be a parliament attempt to impeach. There won't be eternal crisis because the president in Ukraine is not a czar. We have seen different things, right? Yushchenko, Tymoshenko come to mind. And here Arestovich eventually leaves. And what goes next? Well, maybe somebody to follow in his footsteps? Right, maybe. But could have been also somebody like Zelensky. That's how democracies work. Trump only has 2 years left of his presidency. Now he has the Congress elections in the middle, and nobody guarantees that the Republicans will win. And then 2 years from now, Vance may not prevail if he runs. And then guess what? There'll be USAID, Voice of America, arms in the Biden style to Ukraine, Johnson or somebody else in Ukraine, and Ukraine again attacking Russia. And Russian Federation can say in this way, okay, we looked at you. You democracies cannot provide continuity of politics. And this is arguably one of the main things that every political system needs to be able to provide. That's why any agreements with you can live only while you are in power. Ideally, it could be 10 years. Less than ideal, 4. And if we take parliamentary republics, their coalitions can fall apart and you can have 8 elections in 2 years, or like in Israel recently. what it is there for us to agree with about, and second, with whom. And this is the depths of the tragedy in this situation. And there's practically no exit from such a worldview. But does it mean that people who offer an option to exit this strategy, to exit this, find an exit from this tragedy, may be completely theoretical? Does it imply that you should be sending international warrants to these people, for these people? That tells you whom are we dealing with in Moscow. So you took it as an offense. No, I did not. That international warrant, it's neither hot nor warm for me. Russian requests are not fulfilled by anybody, maybe in Thailand or Burma, Myanmar. Even China and India are ignoring these requests. I'm not even talking about the countries of the West. But this is a signal. This is a signal of the people that we deal with on the other side. Okay, you don't agree with Trump's offer. Get 6 districts, cut Ukraine off from the sea. I understand there could be western borders of Russia that you're trying to protect. But when another person comes and says, if we're brotherly nations, we should go here, and then he is being prosecuted, that's as if I would be suing you, Alexander, right before every stream. You don't have to be offended, but you are in full rights to ask a question how logical it is, how sequential it is with previous events and the ones that will follow, how reasonable it is. That's why the war likely is not going to finish in the nearest future, and it likely will continue to the extreme positions when one of the sides will not be able to continue fighting this war, or will understand that they cannot continue fighting this war in the long term. In Kiev, by the way, Alexei, we have an aerial morning right now, and Russians are destroying railroads, energy systems, natural gas pipelines. And I remembered about one thing that you mentioned. Despite the horrors that they already created in Ukraine, that people are cooking on little gas stoves out in the yards or on balconies, Russians are still doing it so weirdly. They are somewhat dispersed, because you could have sent 16, 20 drones on the substations near the nuclear power lines, power stations. And that's it. That nuclear station cannot supply anything after. Instead, they're destroying smaller targets, 20, 30,000 amps. Right. They're not big, but they're important. Here's the problem, Alexander. 750s are still manufactured. 330s, the spare parts for them are not manufactured. Maybe on some ex-USSR countries, but it's difficult. Since they've been destroyed several times over in Ukraine, this is basically the last generation of supply parts that we're using. That's why they don't need 20 UAVs on certain substations. They need just 1 or 2 that hit one of those 330s. And revision, and if the target is not destroyed, another one will fly. Out of new things this year that we observe, their attempts to destroy rail cars and trains on the railroads. They're trying not to hit the electric trains, because those will stop after they destroy the electric grid. They're targeting mostly coal-driven trains, so there is logic in what they do. They're showing us the cost, the price of this war to Ukraine. And they're saying that in this year, the price will be higher for all the energetics in winter, and if you want to continue fighting, your price tag for this will be pretty high. This is very understandable in the framework of campaign they've picked and they're following through with. Alexei, then what can we say about the decision made recently by Ukraine authorities, that Zelensky government, that They're raising salaries to teachers, that free checkups annually for those at 40. So additional 1.5 billion flowing into the pockets of Ukrainians this year, supposedly as benefits. So Rudenko mentioned that he will not be able to protect the whole gas pumping station system, but they will be figuring out alternative ways from Europe. Did you, by the way, notice, Alexander, that they're putting mesh on the Russian side against our drones? They're trying to cover their refineries with additional mesh, which is pretty effective, especially if it's 2 or 3 layers, so they can't reach it. And we're not doing that. So I still have questions. Where did we spend $1.5 billion? The only thing I can see as the result is that we're not having electricity in most cities in Ukraine regularly. That's why I said before, and I reiterated it recently, and will say it again, that the complexity of questions to be solved by Ukraine in order to survive, whether we're joining NATO, who are our allies, how do we save our energy systems, all these questions are beyond the competence level of the ruling power in Ukraine. Moreover, I would say that there is another pure military sign. They are breeding so many types of troops, so many branches of military, additional space force, additional UAV systems, almost like space marines. This indicates that something is falling apart in the military system. And that started to develop about 1.5 years ago. Why? Because those major decisions that Putin made at the beginning of this war, they started to pull Russia slowly but gradually from the dead end they initially found themselves in. However, Ukraine failing to make symmetric decisions is lagging behind, and that's why we're seeing these cracks. We started making these decisions under pressure partially in autumn of 2024. And even those, too little, too late, not enough. Back then, at Golovanov's interview, I think about a year ago, I made a statement that after Zelensky's Vilnius summit and then his visit to the United States, I said that the scope of questions that need to be solved for Ukraine in order to survive are beyond the competency of Zelensky's admin. And by the way, remember that my point there was elections, because elections was actually being propagated actively. Our only solution for Ukraine would be elections to survive in such a difficult time. And even society in Ukraine started talking about that more. The tragedy of Ukraine is in that Russian Federation, like a steamroller, will continue steaming and rolling. And this is only a beginning in some way, because they're now dealing with Ukraine systemically. And most likely they will achieve most of their goals in regards to destruction of train park and electric grids. And we have no resources to seriously counteract that. Not because we're dumb, but because our leaders do not have it as the goal number one. This is not their primary goal. And moreover, the worse it is in Ukraine, in some fashion it is easier for them. Because in a country where the cities do not have electricity for 16 hours a day, when the trains are not coming on time, it's easier to implement martial law. It's easier to suppress opponents. I remember a Politico article that was published this week where it was said that in accordance with the Western estimations, Zelensky is using this war to suppress his political opponents. And you don't need to go too far. 2 of these media opponents sanctioned are in this stream. And the worse situation is in Ukraine, the easier it will be for him to maintain his status quo. What exit does Zelensky have? Many people are asking. He has a simple one: to stay in power for 2 more years. then with big probability, Democrats will likely win, and then it starts all over again. Many people will say that 2 years is too far. Well, we're already at 4. It's over half, and you didn't even notice. What about victims? Who cares about victims in this strange game called politics, Alexander? Well, Trump cares, apparently. Trump is a good man, yeah. He is a believer. He is a religious man. Have you seen any religious men in the president's office? If they do, that's some sort of other religion. Here, you need to understand it right. They're not some reptilians running Ukraine. They're just very much like Russian military, who do not target the hospital or the birthing ward on purpose. They were targeting the electric station nearby, but if they missed, because, they don't care. And same with Zelensky. Well, yeah, it's war. That's how we're going to make our power and money. Oh, yeah, we heard that from his interview. Just, everything is nominal. That's why the tragedy, Alexander, of such people as Arestovich is in that his peace plans are not needed on any of the sides of this conflict, even theoretically. Everybody giddily are continuing to fight this war and position that he is trying to push, that we need to stop this war, that we need to take a pause and take stock and find ways to agree and to not kill each other. Both sides do not see it as a profitable option. And I'm making, another 150th movement that is not profitable for me, my career and everything. And I understand that however many drones and fundraisers I run, the level of incompetence makes all these efforts rather puny. Drones from Arestovich cannot solve the deficiency of Zelensky government. But this is my personal position. This is the one I take, understanding the complete hopelessness and absolute lack of personal profitability of this position for myself. It is absolutely a devastating position from many angles, but there is no other option. And that's why I only have one option. I guess there is another one where I can become indifferent and just do some fundraisers and disappear from the public arena. But something, when my friends appeal to me from the front, from Ukraine, they basically tell me, hey, you can do whatever, but we would really appreciate a pickup truck now because we have nothing to transport the wounded from the front line with. So I continue. And that's why I'm saying it would be very beneficial to raise the effectiveness of Ukrainian troops on the front by at least 15%. That would cause a significant pause on the Russian side and hopefully some thought. We don't need to become archangels and Makedonskys and some super advanced like Speer, Minister of Industries in Third Reich, whose factories were working 3 shifts like clockwork. We don't need to be that effective. We can only lift our effectivity by 15%. Remember the words of almost Saint Sternenka? 60% of the drones currently being purchased are malfunctioning, so they cannot be used at the front. An article 360.ua was also remembering Saint Pritula, that General Command is refuting that those 600 million that were given to fortify certain districts are not visible on the satellites. There's no fortifications built. Right, so 600 million, right? Big money. If we become just 15% more effective, it would be so much easier to make Russians pause and reconsider this war. Today, it is probably only Trump who can do that. Secondary, Europe might help, and third, some defense forces in Ukraine, those people who refuse to surrender, who are still fighting in Ukraine, they can help do that. And what the paradox here is, I get a lot of reviews, a lot of commentary from different people, different countries, different political forces. There are some forces on the Ukrainian side who can give those 26 million. if there is a chance to push it. And many of them are saying that, you know what, we cannot even officially acknowledge that we support you. We cannot even acknowledge our support to the peace plan. And the problem is that if Russian Federation would be ready to negotiate with us, we would have found forces and organizations in Ukraine that would prevail over the party of war, or at least be an adequate competition to it. The core of the problem is that Russian Federation and its leadership is pushing us towards a trap, where any party of peace in Ukraine, any party that suggests to sit down at the table and save faces and honor and figure out a way out of this horrible conflict, would be marginalized by Russian leadership. Russian leadership completely denounces any effort. And by the way, I'm that first example. They sent international warrant on my name after I suggested a Christian exit out of this war, brotherly war. Not Zelensky who is marginalizing the party of peace. It is Russian position. It's Putin and his administration that are doing that. They're basically saying, get the F from under our boots, we'll get you all on the bayonets and we'll step on your throats and you will behave as we tell you to. And this is the tragedy of this story. They are not even leaving a chance to a party of peace, but to continue fundraisers for drones and other equipment. This is the crux of the current problem. You and I are the party of peace. And they're not giving us any chance other than resist and continue fighting. If you are sane, at least do not send a warrant to a person who is suggesting peace. But this is beyond them. End of the first segment.